This video will look at segment bisectors. The next video will look at angle bisectors. So let's get started with some terminology. A midpoint is a point that's halfway between A and B. It's in the middle. It bisects the segment into two congruent segments. Congruent means exactly the same. And we make the notation of these tick marks. One red tick mark and one red tick mark means those two segments are congruent. A segment can also be bisected by another segment, a ray, a line, or a plane. Anything that cuts the segment into two congruent pieces. If you have a segment that's on a Cartesian plane and you know the coordinates of the endpoint, you can find the midpoint using this formula. It's finding the average of the x-coordinates and the average of the y-coordinates. And when you're finding the average of two things, you add them together and divide by 2. So that's what this formula is showing you. So let's do an example together. You might want to hit pause now and see if you can do it on your own, and then come back and check your work. So if we were going to find the midpoint of a segment with these two endpoints, we need to find the average of the x-coordinates. So to find average of two things, we add them together and divide by 2. So the numerator is 4 divided by 2, so our x-coordinate is 2. And 2 is halfway between 1 and 3. Now let's do the y-coordinates. So we have negative 12 and 10. So we're going to add those two together. And negative 12 plus 10 is negative 2. Divided by 2 is negative 1. So there's our midpoint. So the halfway point between these 2 points is 2, negative 1. Let's do that same process again, only let's do it on a Cartesian plane. And then you can graph it and see if you're right. So again, hit pause if you'd like to try this one on your own. So 3, negative 5 is down here. And negative 1, 7 is up here. If we're going to find the average of the x values are 3 and negative 1. So I'm adding 3 and negative 1 together. And average, so I'm dividing by 2. So 3 plus negative 1 is 2. Divided by 2 is 1. So my x-coordinate is 1. And now if I'm going to do the y-coordinate, it's 7 plus negative 5, finding the average. 7 plus negative 5 is 2. Divided by 2 is 1. So 1, 1, or this point right here is my midpoint. So this piece and this piece are the same, so I make the congruent tick marks. Let's try something a little different here. If the segment has an endpoint of negative 9, 12 and a midpoint of negative 4, 8, what's the other endpoint? So I know I was supposed to take negative 9 and add it to something, to that second x-coordinate, and divide by 2, and I was supposed to get an answer of negative 4. The midpoint's x-coordinate is negative 4, so that's how I know what it's supposed to be. So here's where my algebra skills of solving an equation is really going to help me out. I'm going to multiply both sides by 2, and then I'm going to add 9. So the x-coordinate is 1. And I'm going to do the same thing to see if I can figure out what the missing y-coordinate is. So I know it's 12 is the first one. I'm supposed to add it to something, find the average, and I should get 8. So again, multiply both sides by 2. So I know that it should add up to 16. So the y-coordinate must be 4. So the point that is the other endpoint is 1, 4. And there's another way to think about this. You have negative 9, 12, that's what you started with. And the midpoint is negative 4, 8. And then you're continuing on and looking for a value. Here's another way to think about it. From negative 9 to 4, the value went up 5. So go up 5 again, and you get to 1. From 12 to 8, you went down 4. So go down 4 again, and you get to 4. So that pattern will always hold true when you're dealing with midpoint.